Also worth pointing out, just as an aside, it's an obvious conflict of interest because if Riot, who themselves essentially, I always say this because until the economics change in esports, this is just essentially the way the industry works. Riot's main customer for the LCS is the person who bought the LCS slot, basically the teams. So what you're doing is letting Riot potentially say to their real customer, the team, if you don't want me to ask questions, like let's say, for example, about Alfari, if it was Team Liquid the last 3 weeks, it's okay. I'll make sure that those don't get through the pre-screening. Or I'll make sure that the one you want gets through, the one that's like, isn't there maybe another, the one that is the shill questioner. So that in itself is a dangerous precedent to me. It's like, I wouldn't mind, as Jacob says here, if someone, listen, we can obviously have like an eye test to this. If someone's asking patently stupid questions that are time wasting questions, that's going to be pretty easy to tell, contrasted with like, if they say, oh, it's just time wasting, but the person's asking like hard hitting questions, they've done the journal, you're going to be able to tell just by hearing if that's nonsense or not. So I'm not against the premise of like essentially a tiered system of credentialing. Like if you just start and you go there and you're a nobody guy like you're talking about, you're at the bottom and you have to sort of, maybe you have to ask if you get asked 1 or 2 questions, and as long as they're legit, you get a bit more rope, as it were. And then the people who've been there years and years have, like the best pass or whatever. Because part of this, by the way, that ties back into the whole Travis issue is these are issues that Travis has benefited from in the past. Like I remember years and years and years ago when literally anyone, essentially as long as you could get on the list, could just go and be a journalist. And in doing so, after a game, as long as you could find them in the corridor, you could ask any player. You could ask the best player in the world. You could ask the worst. Well, it wouldn't be an LCS, but you know what I mean. You could ask like Piglet or fucking Doublelift or something. You could ask anyone for an interview. Now, I will say, I remember when one of the first things Riot changed was they were like, well, now what you're going to have to do is if you want like a player interview, you've got to ask us and then we'll go and ask the player. And I remember saying to Travis, like, dude, how can you be in favor of this? Like, this is bullshit. Like, we literally are supposed to be people who came up learning networking skills. In other words, how to convince someone that they might want to do an interview with you or how to get over the fact that they might have like initial resistance. And so I said to him, dude, like, literally, first of all, if you're good at your job, you'd want that because that's an advantage you have over the guy who just came and doesn't know anyone. Yep. Like, he has to essentially get credentialed by learning stuff. But secondly, in this scenario, it's going to help you in the short term because if you're someone like Travis, you're just going to get your interview probably. They're going to go, especially back then, they're going to go and get your Meteors or fucking Doublelift or whoever you want for the interview. I said, but you are realizing, like, eventually, first of all, they'll use that against you one day when you're the one they don't want to come for the interview. And secondly, you're just getting a leg up unfairly in that scenario over some of the other people. So it's all, so I find that whole topic like always a slippery slope because they'll always give a good reason they want to bring in one of these, like, essentially like a layer of gatekeeping. And I agree, by the way, with the premise of gatekeeping idiots out of the space. Of course, it's going to waste everyone's time, but you have to be really careful, as always, with who decides what the gatekeeping is and what the metrics are.
Well, it's also on the jump in.
Yeah, to go back to that point, I think that one of the other things that needs to be mentioned too is that when we talk about Riot, they've always had some questionable media policies, and they've played this gatekeeping game that Thorin is talking about. Remember when they literally banned Loco Doco from doing interviews without giving any kind of real reason, which seriously impacted Loco's livelihood, and also conveniently removed him as a potential competitor to Travis. And so I think like outright banning people from being on site and doing these interviews is also a practice that they have engaged in and not been transparent on in the past, which is I don't think that banning Loco Doco was good for the broader LCS content scene, and we didn't hear a lot at that point in time. But they've kind of it's been this show is going to be about a lot of the kind of media policies and practices that they have beyond what Travis discusses, because this has been a long time coming. Basically, there's been a lot of weird stuff going on over the last couple of years. Rich,
before you go, can I talk? I want to hark back to just something Duncan said.
Yeah, do it.
He was talking, Duncan, you were talking about sort of the kind of like the privilege attached to being one of those top journalists. It's funny how like crazy wishy-washy that can be. So like my first Riot event was MSI 2015. And I was able to actually get a fair amount of access, kind of just what Riot was doing, what they do now and have done for the past 6 years. They were gatekeeping who got what, right? But I was like putting in requests for some of the best players in the world and getting them in front of me. And 6 months later, not even 6 months later, I was at LCS finals in New York. I paid my way to go there as a freelancer. Sort of had a plan to do enough content to make my money back while working for Daily Dot as a freelancer at the time. And I was credentialed. Everything was great. It was smooth. I got to New York City. I stayed in Queens, commuted to Madison Square Garden. And we get there and they go, okay, no one gets interviews except for Travis and ESPN. and Travis was at CBSI at the time. I think GameSpot by that point. I think On Gamers had finally caved in on itself because of the whole Reddit ban. But anywho, yeah. So like, we all were credentialed and just sitting there with nothing to do. Like, I went and met a few people. It was a good networking experience for me, if nothing else. But it was like a $1,200 networking experience that I didn't make any money back on because I couldn't do any content other than what I could have done from home. And I was credentialed. I was in the Madison Square Garden press room where the Knicks beat reporters sit, and it just didn't matter. And so I think kind of both of what you were talking about and what Monty was talking about earlier, like, this is someone, and I've been there too, as someone that worked at ESPN, that like they privilege these types of people, and then suddenly the privilege goes away, and it's this huge deal with no introreflection. That's what really bothered me about the Travis thing, is he didn't look at the privilege that he's gotten his entire career in talking about Riot's media policies as a whole.
Yeah. And by the way, as a theme, because you're going to see this throughout the episode, like I said with Travis, like, he doesn't get that fucking line out of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like, Sauron doesn't share power. He thinks he does every time. He thinks he can be Saruman in every scenario. He doesn't realize Riot just waits until, there's no one left for you, and then they just fuck you finally. That's what they do with everyone.
So like, I've got material for Travis, so let me know when we're ready to go in on that.
Well, maybe keep it more abstract initially, get the voice the way.
I've got the receipts, and I've been rehearsing it. I want to make sure I get it right.
All right.
So
did you practice it in the mirror?
No, because it's one of those things. It's like I have to kind of astrally project myself to get to a level of calm, because it just makes me so irate to see this guy think he's actually equipped to talk about any of this stuff. This fucking jellyfish. I can't believe, like, put it this way. I think you're even being generous by saying that what he's saying is actually okay. So on that regard, let's talk about policy. First of all, with Riot Games in general, it has been, as you rightly and astutely said, Duncan, they don't fucking chuck the frog in the fucking pan of water when it's already scalding. They let you sit in, they let you marinate in it, they warm it up. You think, ooh, this is a lovely bath. And before you fucking know it, someone's farting in your face, and all your data's been sold to China. That's how Riot Games operate.
It's metaphor, but I get your point.
Yeah. I couldn't keep up with the frog stuff. I just had to make it stuff they've actually done. So anyway, their approach to journalism has always been one of, if you play ball with us, we'll play ball with you. The only kind of journalism Riot Games has ever understood is access journalism. You say what we want, you stay on message, and if you prove you can do it, 1 event, 2 event, and you don't do anything we don't like or disagree with, next time you want that big interview with the person, we'll give it to you. Next time you want a little scoop or a little crumb of information that behooves us, we'll give it to you. And that's what it is. It's you give action, you get action. It's access journalism. So this policy is perfectly in line with a company who only views journalism through the lens of how does it serve us. Now, by the way, as I do believe Riot is just an entity of pure, unfettered evil, I don't even have a problem with them being that way. I think it is a toxic, irredeemable company that employs some of the most heinous people who've ever worked in esports, as being evidenced in the constant slew of lawsuits and horror stories. And it's been that way for years, and people like me knew about it for years, but we were deemed the bad ones, because we would say, in a way you don't like, you people out there in fucking cyberspace, well, he's a bit brash, isn't he? Yeah, he is speaking up for women who are being fucking, like, sexually preyed upon, or systemic sexism in the workplace. But, at the end of the day, I don't like the way he says it. So you were all fine with that, by the way, League of Legends community. You tacitly supported that when you drove people like me out. Good job. So that's fine. You sleep with that at night. At the end of the day, Riot Games, it's completely from a point of self-interest, which is all I ever expect Riot Games to do. So this shouldn't surprise anybody. And the last person it surprises is Travis. I'm pretty sure he knew this was coming. He is not even annoyed at the policy, by the way. His video reveals that. He's such a doofus. He can't even cloak his inner thoughts, his inner monologue, his dark secrets from people.
As in, if he'd have been allowed to get his questions through, you think he would have thought it was an okay policy, like I said earlier?
He actively says, as I'm sure Jacob will go into now, he actively says the problem with the policy was that he adhered to it. He followed it. So understand, if you have a problem with a policy, you don't say, I will go along with said policy. You say, wait a fucking minute. But he went along with it like a good boy, and he submitted his question.
Okay.
And if his question had been asked in a timely fashion, he would have been fine with it. But it wasn't. Somebody else got to scoop him. By the way, what he thinks is a fucking scoop is just a joke to somebody like me. But he got scooped on a very important question he thought he would get answered first. Upcomer did an interview while that question was going through the pipe. And so the big important question that only super smart Travi Gafford could ask got answered in someone else's exclusive. And then he went fucking bananas. And that's why he made that video.
Yeah.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.